They weren't gangsters. They weren't spies. They were American soldiers, heroes of World War II. But when the war ended, some of them found a new kind of battlefield. The black market of Europe, from stolen gold to fake funerals, from hidden warehouses to secret fortunes. These men turned chaos into profit. This is the true story the Army tried to bury. How U.S. soldiers built one of the biggest smuggling networks in history. When World War II ended, the world expected peace. But in the shadows of victory, another kind of war began. A war for profit. A war fought not with guns, but with cigarettes, gasoline, and chocolate bars. Across the ruins of Europe, thousands of American soldiers stumbled upon a new kind of opportunity. They had access to something far more valuable than weapons. They had stuff, mountains of it. Tons of supplies sitting in warehouses, left over from a war that was finally over. While Europe starved, the U.S. Army was drowning in surplus. Boxes of food, medical kits, soap, gasoline, typewriters, even luxury goods, all marked U.S. property. And to desperate civilians in Berlin, Rome, or Paris, those three letters U.S. meant gold. Soon, an underground market began to rise fast. Locals called it der Schwarzmarkt, the black market. A secret economy, where everything had a price and where American soldiers weren't heroes anymore. They were businessmen. Imagine this, a bar in Paris, 1946. The city is half in ruins, but the bar is full, smoke, laughter, jazz music from a crackling radio. In a dark corner, a young American GI slides a pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes across the table. The Frenchman, opposite him, nods and places a small gold coin in return. One simple trade, and both men smile. But what started as small deals soon grew into a billion-dollar network of smuggling and corruption. Truck drivers, supply officers, even pilots began to move goods not for the army, but for themselves. Some soldiers made more money in a month than generals earned in a year. The U.S. military called it the black market crisis. But to the men running it, it was simply the American dream, reborn in the ashes of Europe. And that's where our story begins. The true story of how American soldiers, fresh from victory, built one of the largest underground empires in post-war Europe, and how the U.S. Army tried and failed to stop them. At first, it was innocent. A few soldiers trading rations for wine, chocolate for watches. Everyone did it, or at least everyone looked the other way. But in the chaos of post-war Europe, small deals became big business, and big business became organized crime. Let's rewind to Germany, 1946. American convoys were running day and night, hauling food and fuel to feed this starving population. Each truck carried thousands of dollars worth of supplies, gasoline, cigarettes, sugar, meat. And every time one of those trucks disappeared for a few hours, no one asked too many questions. Somewhere along the road from Frankfurt to Munich, a few boxes would quietly fall off. Those boxes would reappear later, in a smoky cafe, in a farmer's barn, or in the basement of a nightclub. And there, a small fortune changed hands. Soon, the G's realized something. The system was too big to notice a few missing crates. And the officers in charge, they were often just as tempted. A few forged papers, a false signature, and an entire shipment could vanish. On paper, it never even existed. One supply sergeant in Bavaria reportedly earned more in 3 months of black market trading than he did in his entire military career. His secret? Connections. He had a buddy in transportation, another in inventory control, and a German middleman who could sell anything for the right price. They called it the network. Truck drivers, clerks, warehouse guards, civilians, all linked by a simple rule: don't get caught. And the goods? Practically everything. Cigarettes, the unofficial currency of post-war Europe. Gasoline, sold to taxi drivers and farmers at 10 times the military price. Blankets, boots, canned food, coffee, even army jeeps. If it was stamped U.S. property, someone was selling it. The business spread like wildfire. In Italy, soldiers smuggled typewriters and silk stockings to Rome. In France, whiskey from American bases fueled the city's booming nightlife. In Berlin, the black market was so huge that it had its own schedule, its own code words, even its own bankers. Every city had a kingpin, usually a soldier who knew how to play both sides, loyal to his unit by day, a smuggler by night. Some wore medals on their chests and cash in their boots. Others used military planes to move contraband between countries, disguised as official cargo. By 1947, the black market millionaires weren't just rumors anymore. They were real, living large in the very cities America had helped rebuild. Bars, nightclubs, and even small hotels were secretly owned by former GIAs. They drank champagne, wore tailored suits, and bragged that they'd found the real American dream, not on Wall Street, but in the rubble of Europe. But with all that money and power came attention. Whispers started reaching the higher-ups. Shipments were disappearing. Warehouse logs didn't add up. Something massive was happening beneath the surface, and the U.S. Army couldn't ignore it anymore. Because this wasn't a few bad apples. This was a full-blown empire. And soon, the Army's own investigators, the counterintelligence corps, would begin hunting the very men who once wore their uniform. By 1947, the war was long over. But the black market? It was just getting started. Europe was rebuilding, slowly, painfully. Cities were still half destroyed. Families lived on ration cards and memories. And through that chaos, American goods became more than luxury. They became life itself. A single bar of soap could feed a family for a week. A pack of cigarettes could buy a pair of shoes. And if you had access to army supplies, you weren't just a soldier, you were a walking gold mine. In cities like Berlin, Rome, and Paris, black market trade became a daily ritual. You could buy anything: food, fuel, nylon stockings, even penicillin, if you knew the right soldier. And those soldiers, many of them only in their 20s, learned something fast. Europe might have lost the war, but it was the perfect place to get rich. They built networks like small corporations. Drivers delivered. Clerks forged papers. Locals handled the sales. Some even hired translators and bodyguards. What started as side hustles became international operations, spanning from Italy to Germany to Austria. In Berlin, American cigarettes became the unofficial currency. A single carton of Lucky Strikes could buy a bicycle. 10 cartons? You could rent an apartment for a month. Meanwhile in Rome, whiskey and coffee from U.S. bases flooded the nightlife scene. American G's were treated like celebrities, part savior, part supplier. You'd see them walking into jazz clubs wearing military jackets and Rolex watches. That probably came from a lost shipment. And here's the strange part: not everyone disapproved. To many Europeans, these trades kept people alive. A loaf of bread, a liter of fuel. It didn't matter how it got there, as long as it did. Even some officers turned a blind eye. One colonel later admitted, "You can't court-martial a man for feeding a family, even if he's selling army coffee to do it." But not everyone was playing small. Some soldiers went big, really big. They pooled money, bribed warehouse managers, and started exporting American goods across borders. Some partnered with local gangsters. Others worked directly with the Italian mafia or former Nazi smugglers in Germany. The irony? The war had united these countries through destruction. And now, greed was uniting them again. By late 1947, entire cities had economies running parallel to official ones, one legal, one in the shadows. And in the shadows, the money flowed freely. A few American ex-servicemen even stayed behind when their units went home. They opened bars, pawn shops, and shipping businesses using black market cash. Their names were forgotten by history, but locals still whispered about the American who got rich overnight. For a brief moment, the black market was the real economy of Europe. It ran faster, paid better, and reached farther than any government system. And while the US Army tried to restore order, its own men were fueling the chaos. But no empire lasts forever. As rumors of corruption reached Washington, the military brass decided to act. The Counterintelligence Corps, the CIC, was about to go undercover, and their mission? To take down the very soldiers who'd helped rebuild Europe, by breaking it first. By 1948, the black market had grown too big to hide. Whole warehouses were empty, convoys were lost, and American goods kept flooding European streets. It wasn't a few bad apples anymore. It was a full-blown underground empire. Headquarters in Frankfurt started receiving reports that didn't add up. Supply numbers were off by thousands of tons. A shipment of gasoline vanished near Nuremberg. A train carrying US Army rations derailed, and before investigators arrived, the cargo was already gone. Something was rotten inside the victory machine. And for the first time, the US Army realized the enemy might be wearing the same uniform. That's when the Counterintelligence Corps, or CIC, stepped in. Their mission: track the missing goods, expose the smugglers, and shut down the black market from the inside. These men were soldiers too, but now they were hunting their own. They called it Operation Haystack, because finding the truth in post-war Europe was like finding a needle in one. CIC agents posed as traders, drivers, even black market customers. They followed paper trails, wiretapped phone calls, and slipped into bars where American G's cut deals with German middlemen. And what they found shocked everyone. Entire units were involved: drivers, mechanics, clerks, even officers. Fake invoices, stolen fuel, falsified shipping manifests. The system was bleeding millions. One report described how a single sergeant had rerouted 2 entire truckloads of coffee to the French border. The value? Over $200,000 in today's money. And when investigators caught up with him, they found he'd built a villa outside Paris, furnished entirely with US Army property. The Army couldn't ignore it any longer. Arrests began. MPS raided barracks at dawn, seizing cash, cigarettes, gold, and foreign currency. Some soldiers were court-martialed, others quietly discharged. But for every smuggler they caught, 10 more slipped away, because by then, the black market had evolved. It wasn't just American soldiers anymore. Civilians, former Nazis, mafia members, even Soviet officers were now in on it. What started as a few missing crates had become a vast, multinational operation, too big for anyone to control. CIC agents described it as a war within the war. The front lines weren't trenches anymore. They were warehouses, docks, and back alley bars. The weapons weren't rifles, but bribes, ledgers, and silence. And the silence was deafening. Many cases were buried to avoid embarrassment. The US Army, still trying to project strength as an occupying force, didn't want the world to see its soldiers in handcuffs. So some files disappeared. Some witnesses were transferred. And the biggest players simply vanished. Yet, behind closed doors, the message was clear. The golden days of the black market were over. The risk had become too high. The eyes of Washington too sharp. Still, you can't just erase an empire built on desperation and greed. Even as investigators packed up, the trade continued quietly, slipping under new names and new hands. The uniform might have changed, but the hunger for easy money stayed the same, because in post-war Europe, survival was still currency. And for a few American soldiers, the difference between a hero and a criminal was just one deal away. Even after the investigations, the black market never truly died. It just slipped deeper into the shadows, into the smoke-filled bars, the back alleys, the whispered stories told long after midnight. Because where there's war, there are always survivors. And some survivors learn how to profit from survival. In Rome, there was a story about the sergeant and the coffin. Locals swore that, and Kofel swore that, and coffin. American soldiers smuggled contraband through city checkpoints by hiding it inside a wooden coffin marked U.S. Army Human Remains. Inside, not a body, but hundreds of bars of soap, boxes of cigarettes, and a few bottles of bourbon wrapped in blankets. Every few weeks, a coffin would leave a warehouse near the Vatican. And the next day, black market shelves would be full again. No one ever proved it happened. But everyone in Rome knew someone who swore it was true. In Berlin, there was the airlift ghost. During the Berlin airlift of 1948, American planes were dropping food and supplies to starving citizens trapped behind Soviet lines. But one pilot, so the story goes, started dropping something else. At midnight, his C-47 cargo plane would veer off course for a few minutes, release a few crates, and return to base as if nothing happened. Those crates, filled with coffee, alcohol, and chocolate, always landed in the same empty field where a German farmer happened to be waiting. The next morning, that same farmer's market stall would be overflowing. When questioned, the pilot laughed and said, "Guess the wind just likes that field." He was never charged. And then there was Doc, a medic from Texas who'd served in France. According to rumor, Doc smuggled morphine out of army hospitals and sold it to desperate civilians for outrageous prices. When investigators closed in, he vanished. His tent, his papers, even his Jeep were gone. Months later, someone spotted him running a clinic on the French Riviera, treating locals for cash. They said he'd traded his uniform for a white coat, but his patients still called him the American. These stories were never in the official reports. No names, no records, just echoes of a time when the line between hero and hustler blurred into one. And the more unbelievable the story, the more people believed it. Because in the ruins of post-war Europe, anything could happen, and often did. Even the investigators began to lose track of what was real and what was rumor. A CIC officer once wrote in his diary, "We found a man selling U.S. Army blankets in Vienna today. He said he bought them from a priest, who got them from a colonel, who got them from God." That's how tangled it was, the supply chain of sin. By the early 1950s, the black market began to fade, replaced by the Marshall Plan and a growing European economy. But the legends never left. In every bar, in every old story told by candlelight, there was always a man, an American, who made it big during the occupation. Some say they retired in Florida. Some say they died broke in Paris. And some, the lucky few, just vanished, leaving behind only rumors and the ghosts of a fortune born from the ashes of war. By the early 1950s, Europe had changed. The rubble was being cleared, factories were rebuilding, and the Marshall Plan was pumping billions of American dollars into the continent. The sound of gunfire had been replaced by the hum of construction. But in the quiet corners of cities like Berlin, Paris, and Rome, one question lingered. What happened to the men who built the black market? Some of them went home to the United States and simply disappeared into normal life. They got jobs, started families, bought houses in the suburbs. To their neighbors, they were veterans, heroes of World War II. But behind closed doors, a few of them had suitcases full of foreign currency, gold coins or jewelry they'd never explain. Others stayed behind. In Europe, a handful of former soldiers became small-time entrepreneurs, opening bars, pawn shops, and import businesses using the money they'd earned in the shadows. Their friends joked that they had graduated from the black market to the free market. And in a way, they had. In France, one ex-GI was known for owning 3 restaurants along the Riviera. He told people he'd earned his startup money from a poker game in Berlin. Maybe that was true. Or maybe those poker chips were cartons of cigarettes once stamped U.S. Army property. In Germany, a few locals still talk about a man named Sammy, an American who supposedly traded military vehicles to farmers for land deeds. By the time the army realized what he'd done, Sammy was long gone, a landowner in Bavaria, living under a new name. None of these stories were ever confirmed. But the legends lived on, just like the scars of war itself. The U.S. Army, embarrassed by the scale of the black market, quietly closed the files. Most records were archived, sealed, or lost. Officially, it became a footnote, a small embarrassment in the aftermath of a great victory. But historians now see it differently. They say the black market taught America a harsh lesson. When you send millions of men into a broken world with too much power, too much money, and not enough oversight, you create your own economy. One that lives in the shadows. In a strange way, those smuggling rings helped fuel recovery. They moved goods faster than governments did. They kept cities fed and people clothed. They blurred the line between corruption and survival. And maybe that's why the story still fascinates us. Because it wasn't just about greed. It was about what happens when survival meets opportunity, when ordinary men, fresh from war, discover they can profit from peace. Even today, if you walk through certain parts of Berlin or Naples, you can still find old shopkeepers who remember the Americans. They'll smile, shake their heads and say, "Those boys had everything." And somehow they sold it all. The soldiers of the black market are long gone, buried, forgotten, or lost to time. But their empire left traces, a few buildings, a few stories, and a quiet reminder that even victory can have a dark side. Because in every war, there are winners and losers. But after the guns go silent, there are always those who find a way to win again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe. History is full of secrets, and sometimes the truth is more dangerous than the war itself.